gonna be one like a porn shot. It's just gonna be like up to the taint. And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Strategy Show. It is Tuesday, June 7th. I am Josh Engelman. I am joined by Greg Ehrenberg. We are brought to you by Prize Picks. We have a 12-game MLB slate to break down after yesterday's absolute nonsense of weather and ugliness. So before we do anything, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Greg, how are you?
Good. I mean, nothing like it's funny you bring up the weather because yesterday Eric and I are doing the show and a couple of people in chat like, why do you guys keep talking about the weather? It's the like, why does the weather matter? Unfortunately, it does sometimes, especially on smaller slates, and ultimately how you handle it. I was on the wrong side of the weather, but ultimately how you handled it very much made or broke the slate. Unfortunately, it's something that's nearly impossible to predict, not only because we don't know necessarily if it's going to rain or if it's not going to rain, but when it's going to start, but then how teams are going to handle it. Because some teams just play through the rain like we saw yesterday or half a game. But at least for today, it doesn't seem like we have any crazy weather concerns, which is a positive.
I'm very happy about that as well. Weather, not something that I tend to care about at all in a strategy show. Like you're going to get 2 more hours worth of content from us later, much closer to lock. Right now, I don't feel the need to, unless there's a game where it's just like, this is like 85% to be postponed later tonight. You might get it in the afternoon. I can't ever care. So we'll talk about weather aggressively on the Deeper Dive and Live Before Lock later tonight. But for now, we got 12 games to break down. I think the slate looks pretty good. I'm excited to play again. It can't go any worse than it did yesterday. So that's going to be really fun to get into. We got an hour. I'm ready to just dive in if you are.
Let's do it.
We are kicking this one off. Pirates and Tigers, not a lot of fun stuff to talk about here, or at least not in my opinion. 3.3 run implied total for the Pirates, 3.6 for the Tigers. It's Jose Quintana for Pittsburgh, Tariq Skubal going for Detroit. Quintana actually pulling some ownership, as is Skubal. So we do have some pitching to talk about. I don't get the sense we'll talk about a ton about hitting. Quintana around 16% owned on DK. Skubal right on the 20% mark. I was a little bit lighter on Quintana coming out of my sim. Skubal basically spot on the number. So I don't have a huge disagreement with the public. These are two pitchers I want to get to. The low total helps.
Yeah. And I mean, actually, I'm a little bit lower on Quintana, but I'll talk about Skubal. I agree with you. I think that the ownership there is warranted. One thing that's kind of unfortunate when it comes to Skubal is the public was really late in picking up on the fact that this guy's actually legitimately good with fantasy upside. 2.15 ERA, 2.68 expected ERA. So his first, 6-7 starts of the year, we're able to roster him as a pivot option off the high end guys. And we're pretty regularly getting Skubal 5-6% ownership. Now we've gotten to a point where he's just appropriately owned. He's in a positive matchup. People are getting there. It makes sense. He's a really good pitcher for real life now, and he's good for fantasy purposes with a 27% K rate. When it comes to Jose Quintana, though, I get that it's a positive matchup. It's so hard for me to buy into this success being legitimate. So he's somebody I would prefer to be underweight to the field on, because once again, his numbers this year, the 2.32 ERA, that's really solid. But some of these underlying stats, he's a 4.5 expected ERA. And the reason it's being buoyed, at least the ERA relative to the underlying numbers, he's a really high strand rate at 75%. He also has a lower BABIP than normal at 284. Look at what we've gotten out of Quintana the last few years. And just even looking at his ERAs, 6.43, 4.5, 4.68. He hasn't had a sub 4 ERA since 2016. And he also throws much harder than he used to in his prime. This is a guy who threw around 93 miles per hour. His average fastball velocity is now 90.9. That's the lowest of his career. He's 33 years old now. I just don't buy into any of this success, especially when he's not striking guys out, only at 19.5%. So if he's actually going to be popular today, I don't really have that much interest in him as an SP2 on DK relative to his ownership.
Yeah, based on where I'm at, I don't have much to disagree with. He came in under that expected ownership mark. I would likely be light. Obviously, the game script looks good. Tigers offense, not good. Decent strikeout matchup. You can't ask for much more there. But from seeing Quintana's ownership at 16%, I just don't need to be there. I would happily pay the $9,800 and join up the 20% of people that are going to have Skubal here, because I like the opposite side. I mean, these are two of the 3 worst offenses on the entire slate. So you're certainly getting into a good spot. Maybe not the best strikeout matchup in the world against the Pirates today, but the park helps. You shouldn't expect to see any long balls or anything. So I like Skubal. I don't have much else to say. I think he's properly owned. Yeah,
no, I think we're on the same page there. It's, and if you look at our top pitchers tool, 20% owned on DK with a 17.5% chance to be a top 2 pitcher over on FanDuel. 8.6% owned, 6.8% chance to be the top scoring pitcher. It all looks appropriate.
When it comes to bats in this one, the Pirates rank 20th of 24 in our stack score metric. The Tigers are actually 9th. That is getting pushed by the fact that they are the second best value stack that you can find today. They're so cheap. One guy, Jonathan Scope at 4,100, most expensive guy in the projected lineup. Everybody else is in the 2s or potentially 3s. So I understand why we would want to potentially go to Detroit, just because you're getting some cheap bats, but it's a 12-game slate. I think it's really easy to find value elsewhere. This is not a game where I'm looking to get a lot of offense.
No, me either. I mean, the implied run totals in this game, it's both well below 4. So not much interest. And in terms of salary saving at offense, sure, on one hand, it makes sense. There are pitchers we want to pay up for today. But here's the flip side of that. On a 12-game slate, you just always end up being like, oh, look, here's that random min-priced hitter that's batting second. And we get 5 or 6 of those on slates this size. And it's just not that hard to find value in one-offs that way to pay up for pitching.
Do you have a single bat in this game that you do want to highlight?
Not really. Once again, if you were to make a couple of Tiger stacks just for the purpose of getting leverage off of Quintana over the course of 150 lineups, that would be sensible. But by and large part, if you're playing 1, 3, 5, 10 lineups, like it's not a game I would have any offense from.
Bingo. Let's get away from it then. Orioles and Cubs. It's a coin flip game. Basically like 4.5 runs on each side. We've got Kyle Bradish going for Baltimore, Keegan Thompson going for Chicago. Neither guy pulling ownership on either site. I got a little bit more interest in Bradish in comparison to Thompson, but in the grand scheme of things, I probably don't have much interest to either one of these guys. Bradish came out in 6% of my sims. That's basically like, sure, you can get him in 150. That's what that number sort of means. So do you have a different take for either pitcher?
Not really. When it comes to Kyle Bradish, he's been bad this year. I understand there's a little bit of strikeout upside there, but I don't think it's necessary on a slate of 12 games. The spot where I'd roster somebody like Kyle Bradish is a 4 or 5 game slate where he's going up against an offense that's really popular against them. And you just throw him in some tournament lineups, cross your fingers, and hope you're getting leverage there. On a slate of this size, I don't think it's necessary. And then when it comes to Keegan Thompson, he generally doesn't work all that deep into games, which is going to really inhibit his upside, particularly on a slate of this size. It's hard for me to see him really working himself into an optimal lineup when you go look at his innings pitched so far. And last time out, he went a season high 5 1/3 innings. He hasn't struck out more than 5 hitters in any one appearance this year. So his recent starts, 5 1/3 innings, 5 innings, 3 innings, 5 innings, 4 innings, 2 2/3. He just doesn't work deep into games. Hard to consider him.
Yeah, I don't have much that I want to go to here, either side from an arms perspective. We do, though, need to talk about bats, and we got to start with the Cubs, who have the highest expected ownership of any team on today's slate. They are number 1 in ownership share. They are 6th in top stack, 3rd in top value, 3rd overall in our stack score metric. I'm a little bit lighter on the Cubs, but they certainly grade out well for me. What are you doing with Chicago?
Yeah, whenever there's an offense that's this popular and this negatively leveraged against their odds of being a top scoring team, I'm generally going to write them off and just be like, I hope just somebody else ends up being the top scoring team. So if I was to build lineups and submit them right now with this information, I would have 0% exposure to the Cubs being a team 13.3% ownership, 5.6% chance to be a top stack. I understand there's some high arm pitchers on the slate that we're going to want to pay up for. I just don't think it has to be the Cubs offense. And, Kyle Bradish isn't good, but it's not like he's the Cubs don't have a good offense either, but it's not like Bradish is so bad that I would expect him to just totally get eviscerated by a bad lineup like the Cubs. Could it happen? Sure. But on a 12-game slate, I just don't think there's ever a situation where the Cubs would warrant 13.3% ownership short of playing in Coors Field or being in a home game with a crazy amount of wind blowing out.
We're on the same page. I approach the slate the same way that you do. When I see this sort of ownership, it's just so easy to find an equivalent offense that's getting, 1/10 of the ownership that they're pulling right now. Like Wilson Contreras is 25% owned. If you want him to be your cash catcher today, makes a ton of sense to me. That would be a direction I'm going. But if you're playing large field GPPs, you are competing with a large swath, especially if you start going to Contreras and Happ, the 2 most owned guys from the Cubs. And this isn't last year's Baltimore. This park is going to be a little bit different. You are not getting the same sort of benefits. Not that that matters here, but probably is boosting road teams slightly for people that are using an analytical model that aren't making just broad changes to the park changes. Do you want to be on the opposite side of this game? We have the Orioles 15th in our stack tool, so they kind of just exist.
Not because, here's the issue. They're still picking up some sort of ownership. We have them projected for 5% ownership over on FanDuel. DraftKings as well project for 5% ownership, 3% top stack odds. So if this was a team where, and it doesn't matter because it's not the case, but if we're going to be getting them at sub 1% ownership, then I'd be like, sure, here's a contrarian team to add in the mix. But on a 12-game slate where I'm trying to figure out, all right, where could I cut corners? Where could I cut spots out of my player pool? I think both these offenses end up coming out of it just because the ownership is there.
I'm with you. They are 9th in aggregate ownership right now, but 15th in our top stack odds. Just knowing that ordinal ranking lets me know I'm mostly good here. So any individual bats you want to highlight? I'm assuming more so from the Orioles side, since we sort of talked about the Cubs, but if you see a Cubs bat that you like, they do grade out well for a reason.
Yeah. And I mean, like Kyle Bradish is not the worst pitcher, I don't think, on the slate, but he's far from the best. Also, he's much closer to the worst than he is to even being middle of the road. But that aside, the only situation I would be considering Cubs bats, like you mentioned before, would be for cash game purposes. Like Wilson Contreras probably is the catcher I would play in cash games on DraftKings. And then at that point, then it's all right, let's get the security of the high end starting pitchers where we're going to give ourselves a little bit of a floor. That's where I'd be looking at the Cubs. For tournaments, though, not really. I assume that when I build lineups, I would either have none of the Cubs or be massively underweight to every single individual hitter in the lineup.
All righty, we're on the same page. Let's keep this one moving. Game 3 for today. That would be Rays and Cardinals. 4.3 run implied total for the Rays, 3.6 for the Cardinals. Jeffrey Springs going for Tampa. Dakota Hudson going for St. Louis. No ownership coming into Dakota Hudson. Lots of ownership coming into Jeffrey Springs. 24%, in fact. So I need to have a conversation. I'm gonna give this one to you first. Does that make sense to you?
Kind of. I mean, so for two reasons. Number one, there are not very many good cheap pitching options to get behind today. It's a 12-game slate, but there's a reason that people are getting to guys like Garrett Whitlock, Jeffrey Springs, Jose Quintana. It's because there's a lot wanting when it comes to the cheap pitching option. So if somebody wants to pay up for an SP1 or pay up for offense, people are kind of looking where to save at pitching, and the options aren't that great. Springs is underpriced on DraftKings. This is a totally different DraftKings conversation versus FanDuel, because I would never really consider Springs at FanDuel at 8,700. But his results on DK, his results overall for this year, and then his price on DK, it's a bad price. He is at 1.88 ERA this year, a 2.99 expected ERA. He has really good strikeout stuff, 28% K rate for Jeffrey Springs. Over the course of his entire MLB career, he has a 27.1% K rate. So there's clear upside. And he's going to be in my player pool to some extent today, but I'm likely going to be underweight to the field. And then talking about the other side of this game, the Cardinals have a very right-hand dominant lineup that hit left-hand pitching really well. This is one of the best offenses in baseball against left-handed pitching. So I think this is a spot where it makes sense to play both sides, because Springs individually is really cheap on DK, and I think he offers value and upside. But on the other side too, if you're going to stack the Cardinals, you're getting a team that's really good against left-handed pitching. You're also getting leverage off a really popular starting pitcher. So I think there's a lot of GPP appeal here.
Interesting. Second biggest negative leverage starter on our top pitcher tool right now. I was shocked to see this. I'm thinking that I'm underrepresenting his innings. How deep do you think Springs goes in this game?
So the recent outings we've gotten from Springs, we've actually started to see him get stretched out a little bit deeper into games. So this was certainly a concern earlier in the year. The first start he made, he pitched 2 2/3 innings. His last 3 starts, though, he's gone 5 2/3, 6 innings, and 5 innings. No, that's not to say that we're going to get 7 or 8 innings out of Springs, sure. But the fact that we've gotten him going, 5, and then also has pitched into the 6th inning in 2 of those last 3 starts, I think that there is just a guy in there who's stretched out to go at a minimum 5 to 6 innings, assuming everything goes well for him.
Yeah, so I gave him 4 2/3. It'd be more than okay, bumping that up to a flat 5 from an expectation standpoint. But I was very surprised to see the amount of ownership that was coming in here. Not that I'm all that worried. Like, I don't think the Cardinals are anything special. I think they're like a perfectly average offense for today. I don't think it's to me, it's a terrible strikeout matchup. I have their aggregate K rate based on Steamer at 18%. That is very clearly the lowest rate of anybody on today's slate. The highest projected strikeout rate for anybody in the Cardinals lineup via Steamer is 22%. That could be like a low on a bunch of teams here, and that's the high here. So yeah. I don't love the ownership. I think it's a lot easier to just simply take somebody in a comparable spot that isn't getting this ownership.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately what I probably want to do on this slate is prioritize paying up for pitching and then find kind of, maybe an under-owned, cheapish offense. Then maybe that's where I'm going to really look to build my lineups right now, because there are guys on the high end, Screwball, Kyle Wright. We've got Justin Verlander, Manoah, Rodon on the slate. So a lot of high-end options to choose from. And there just is a lot wanting when it comes to the cheap starting pitching. But I could see why people are getting the Springs. And then one other thing I'll bring up about his pitch count, he did get up to 85 pitches last start, and they've slowly been building him up. So it seems like we're probably getting 90 plus pitches out of Springs today.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to go ahead and bump him up to the 5 innings instead of where I had him. I don't want to go too much further, but that will give him a little bit of a bump. Any interest in Dakota Hudson? I don't get the sense the answer is yes.
No, the answer is going to be no when it comes to Dakota Hudson. Where I think we could have some interest, though, is stacking against him, because this is one of those spots I was mentioning before where it's like, all right, well, a team like the Orioles before, where I said, all right, if they were really low owned, there'd be some consideration. And that's where I'm at with Tampa Bay. It's a somewhat cheap offense. They're only projected for 1% ownership with a 3% chance to be a top stack. So this is one that I think for contrarian purposes makes sense to be in the player pool. And then also, the offense is cheap enough to where we're going to be able to pay up for some pitching with them. And one of the reasons that they're cheap is because this is something that I think DraftKings and FanDuel do not do a good job of. Pitchers are often priced for their results and not for their underlying metrics. I do not give a shit that Dakota Hudson has a 2.96 ERA because his underlying numbers are terrible this year. He's a 4.96 expected ERA, a 4.57 FIP. He's a 13% K rate and 11.2% walk rate. By anything I care about, Dakota Hudson sucks. And so I just think this is an easy matchup for the Rays and nobody's rostering them.
Yeah, there is absolutely no ownership coming into this Tampa team. We have them as the number 12 stack. I think this offense is getting underrepresented here a little bit. I would much rather be on the Rays offense than anything else. Certainly, I think there's some value to the Cardinals offense just on the opposite side of the Springs ownership. I don't think that they stand out or anything like that. You know, they are relatively low ranked. The total isn't great, but you do get the leverage of the ownership to Springs to sort of bump you back up on the opposite side. But I'm with you. There's a lot in this middle section of the Rays lineup that is pretty easy to get to. The prices aren't really all that problematic. There's no ownership. Again, 12th in ranking in our stack tool, 20th in aggregate ownership. There's a gap there that I think that you guys can take advantage of.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. And also, just don't get fixated on Dakota Hudson's ERA. Focus more on the underlying numbers and the fact that he's not generating any swing and misses this year.
Yeah. Steamer, 13% K rate, 12% walk rate. The fact that he's even in the majors is incredible.
Yeah.
That's about as bad as it gets.
Yeah. And from a big league standpoint, I guess like if a guy has a sub 3 ERA, you can't just yank him from the rotation, but he's going to be bad going forward. I have pretty little doubt about that. Anything else in this game? Nope. We could go on to game number 4.
We certainly cannot. We can go on to the schedule for the rest of the day. That would be the PGA Strategy Show coming up after this at 1 p.m. So you get a little bit of a break. We let Jordan get out of his seat for an hour, and then he has to come back. I don't even know if he's producing the next show, but we'll make that joke keep going. 4:45 Eastern, MLB Deeper Dive. I will be back with Adam, so we'll be breaking down this one again. Greg, are you back for Live Before Lock tonight?
Yeah, I believe I'm doing it with Eric.
You are doing with Eric now that I look at our schedule. So same combos from yesterday. You get them again today. If it worked out well for you yesterday, you probably didn't listen to us. So make sure you're tuning in later today. Free content. MLB Top Stacks tool is free. We're going to be referencing that all show long. So go check that out, whether that link gets dropped in chat or if you just browse directly to awesemo.com. PGA golfer rankings also free for today. And 222 concurrent viewers, just 37 likes. That's not going to work for me at all. If you haven't done it yet, please hit that thumbs up. We move it on to game 4. Now we're talking the reigning, defending, undisputed champions of the world, the Atlanta Braves, 5.1 run implied total. The A's, 3.4. Kyle Wright, Cole Irvin. Wright, 18% owned on DK. Cole Irvin, not owned at all. I think Kyle Wright's ownership looks spot on. I would be happy to roster him, but it's going to take some salary. 10,100 on DK, 10,500 on FanDuel. Do you have any Kyle Wright thoughts?
Yeah, I think he makes for a pretty decent pivot off of Carlos Rodon, particularly on FanDuel, because on FanDuel, Rodon at 9,900 is projected for 35% ownership, and Kyle Wright is projected for 8.5% ownership. So I don't think that's a bad pivot to make. And then over on DraftKings, like you said, he is picking up 18% ownership. So it's a little bit different. I don't think Rodon outscores him at a 2-to-1 clip, but I don't mind converting some Rodon shares to Kyle Wright. Wright's been really good this year. And, it's hard to know with some of these young pitchers what's a fluke when they're actually breaking out because he's only made 10 starts this year. But this is formerly one of the top pitching prospects in baseball, came up to big leagues and just sucked for a few years. He was not able to find any success. And then all of a sudden, he started to put it together this year. 2.41 ERA, 3.43 expected ERA. The strikeout rate is up to 27.5%. The other thing that's really key for me looking at his numbers, his fastball velocity last year was 93.7. This year it's 95.3. So that's something I could really point to and be like, oh, okay, this is a real tangible improvement where who knows, maybe he was hurt in previous years. Maybe it's something with his conditioning, whatever it is, he's throwing a lot harder. It's leading to much better results. So I do think that when you look at some projection sources like Zips and Steamer, I probably think they're too low on him when you consider they don't have him as a great strikeout guy this year. They also have him with a kind of inflated ERA. I think there's reason to think he's actually breaking out right now. And particularly on FanDuel, I think he's a really, really good tournament pivot off of Rodon.
Thoughts on Cole Irvin?
Don't play him. I mean, it's for whatever reason, he's never cheap, but he's somebody who and also this isn't even an easy matchup for him against the Braves, but if there was a spot where, we were able to get Cole Irvin at like a 5,800 or 6,200 price tag as a potential SP2 on DK, maybe you could consider him, but he doesn't generate strikeouts. He does have a 2.96 ERA, but a 5.06 expected ERA. So what my thoughts here on Cole Irvin are that I don't mind stacking against him with the Atlanta Braves.
Nor do I. They look great to me. I actually think the Braves might be slightly under-owned based on everything that I'm looking at, and Top Stack Tool mildly agrees. They are our number 3 top stack. I might want to get to them a little bit more frequently. I think it's pretty easy to do so. They have the highest expected ISO for me of any team on this slate. They are 10th in our stack score, but 6th in current ownership. I would like to get they have the highest implied total on the slate. I would like to get to the Atlanta Braves today. I think they look fantastic up and down the lineup. I'll basically take anything that I can get here, other than, like Michael Harris, not all that great, but even if you're going to someone like Adam Duvall, who's not exactly the best hitter in the world, certainly has some pop to fix this, particularly against a lefty in Irvin. So floor is yours on anything you want to point out for Atlanta, but I'm with you. I'd like to get here. It's going to cost you though.
Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to the Atlanta Braves offense, like you said, there's certainly an opportunity cost to be associated with them. You're going to have to find a cheap SP2 option you like alongside the Atlanta Braves. But I don't believe in Cole Irvin at all. The underlying numbers for him aren't particularly good this year. He allows a lot of contact, which is always going to lend itself to potential power. There's also wind blowing out to left center field today at Atlanta. That could be favorable for some of these right-handed hitters that hit lefties really well. So, I mean, guys like Ozzy Albies, he's a better hitter against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching. Then we've got Ronald Acuna, Austin Riley, Marcell Ozuna, Adam Duvall at 3K. I know you brought his name up before, but if I had to point to one guy as being a value bat I want to get to from the Braves and also one to differentiate the stack, Duvall's one that would stand out to me. 5% ownership with just that 3K price tag. So there are ways we could find cheap bats in the lineup that also make it more viable than us just going, totally crazy spending up for everybody. So this is a pretty high priority stack for me.
I am with you. A team that isn't a high priority stack for me, or at least I didn't think they would have been the A's, but this is our number 1 value stack on the opposite side of Kyle Wright. They are 5th in our stack score, not pulling any real ownership. Is this a spot where you want to go to try to get some value bats, or can you find one elsewhere?
Not for me. And once again, the offense is so cheap that I could see where people make at least projections will look at the Oakland A's offense and be like, hey, they're really cheap. But I also mentioned before that when it comes to Kyle Wright, I think projection models are a little low on him, which will happen when a pitcher has a track record of being bad and then all of a sudden they break out. That could kind of mess with some sort of projection models. But because I've been able to point at individual things when it comes to Kyle Wright, well, he's throwing a lot harder. His pitch mix is different. I think there's reason to think he's just better than he is in the past. So the Oakland A's are not going to be for me today. We do have them, like you said, as the number 1 projected value offense, but that's just because they're so cheap. I don't really expect much production from them.
I don't really have anything that I want to add here for the A's. I have them as the worst power team on today's slate, dead last in aggregate ISO. So I'm going to go ahead and skip this one in its entirety. No, thank you for the A's. I'll find value elsewhere. And apologies, I mentioned it in chat here, but apologies for the slander to Michael. I didn't realize that I was so aggressively negative to Michael Harris here. as I mentioned in chat. My bad for slandering the 155th best hitter on today's slate.
Michael Harris the second, by the way.
Yes, that is on my screen. I do have Michael Harris II.
Yeah, and he let's see, so 76 WRC plus for him this year. He is a fairly well-regarded prospect, but he didn't exactly light up the minor leagues with his bat either. He's considered to be more of a speed guy who's also a really good defensive player. If you're making a Brave stack and you need to have value at the end, it's fine to get him for correlation. But no, I'm on the same page with you. I don't think Michael Harris is any kind of exceptional hitter.
No, I don't think I'm missing anything on the 9-hole guy with no pop. I need the at-bats, people. Twins and the Yankees. 4.3 run implied total for the Twins, 4.7 for the Yanks. Cole Sands, or if you look at other sites, not Cole Sands. Jamison Taillon going for the Yanks. Sands getting no love, nor should he. Will not be going very deep in this game. Taillon, on the other hand, should be getting more love, getting absolutely no love. Am I crazy here, or should he have more ownership than less than 1%?
Yeah, I mean, 1% is a really low mark, and this is another good pivot option to me off of Rodon. And we'll be talking about that game later. I haven't decided what to make of Rodon yet, because he was really good last year. He was really good to start the year, and he has really struggled as of late. And he's projected for 40% ownership on DraftKings, 35% on FanDuel. So as we're kind of talking through this, I'm trying to reason in my head, like, all right, what's a good pivot off of Rodon's ownership? Because while I think Rodon individually makes sense, I don't want to have him in half of my lineups tonight. And one of the guys that I think we could use to get off him would be Jamison Taillon, who, like you said, he's projected for less than 1% ownership on DraftKings, actually well less than 1% ownership, 0.6%. Here's the one sticking point when it comes to Taillon. He is not generating strikeouts this year. 19.2% strikeout rate, which isn't that much off from his career, 21.7% K rate. So there is a point where if the ownership was to get up to even, say, like 5% on Taillon, I think I'd be less interested in him. But the fact that he's sub 1%, that's an ownership I could get behind when it comes to Taillon. So do I think he should be picking up ownership comparable to a Rodon or a Kyle Wright? No, but it should be higher than 0.5%.
Yeah, so I've got him projected for 4.8 Ks. As I pull up Prize Picks, the presenting sponsor of this show, by the way, we'll talk about them in a bit, but Prize Picks has his strikeout prop set at 5. So I think that I'm working with a good number in my model. He showed up in 10% of my sims. That feels more correct in my brain than seeing him as completely unowned. So he's not someone that I'm aggressively advocating for. Like in terms of being in a lineup, I got him behind Verlander, Rodon, Wright. I've got him behind Manoah. I've got him behind Skubal. But it's still 10% on a guy that's completely unknown. So I want to take that shot. I think I see him as a really easy guy that I want to get to, but he's not a guy that I need to get to in 20, 30% of my lineups. I could take like if I took that 10%, I'd be more than happy if this ownership was where we saw it. And like, I don't love the matchup. The Twins are solid enough. There's pop. There are some strikeouts in the lineup, but nothing too crazy. I just think he's getting a little bit underrepresented.
You play him in 5% of your lineups, you're 10x the field. It's not difficult to get overweight to him at all. And the one thing that I think is kind of a sneaky sort of upside when it comes to Jamison Taillon, this reminds me a little bit of a Nathan Eovaldi last year, where it's, all right, the strikeout numbers aren't exceptional, but he's working deep into games right now. The last 3 starts for Taillon, he's gone 8 innings, and 7 innings. And those were not in easy matchups. They were against the White Sox offense has been underwhelming this year, but White Sox, Tampa Bay, and the Angels, and he went 7, 8, and 8 innings in those starts. That'll offset some of the lack of strikeout upside, because if you're getting an extra inning or 2 out of somebody, it kind of accounts for some of the points anyway. So Taillon, to your point you were making before, I think it totally makes sense to have him in 5 to 10% of lineups in large field tournaments.
Next up, I guess we should talk about our number 1 stack today, both in top stack and top stack score. That would be the New York Yankees. And do I like the Yankees? Yeah. Do I like them as my number 1 stack today? No, I don't. Do you?
They're pretty close to it. And So here is the opportunity cost with the Yankees. It's an expensive offense. And in general, I do want to try to prioritize paying up for pitching today. But if I'm going to take a shot on one pay up offense today, I actually do lean with the Yankees a little bit over the Braves. We have very similar ownership on, actually the exact same ownership on DraftKings, 6.8% aggregate ownership on both the Braves and the Yankees. But the Yankees a 10.7% chance to be the top stack on the slate. Like you said, number one in our top stacks tool, which is also free to use today. And the Braves are 8.4%. So we're getting positive leverage on the Yankees. We know how much firepower there is in the offense. And they're going up against a pitcher who, do we know, has Cole Sands been confirmed, or do we still not really know his pitching for the Twins?
I'm not sure. I have Cole Sands, and I haven't seen any. I didn't really dig much further. So,
all right. So Cole Sands is pitching at the major league level. Doesn't belong at the major league level because he made 6 appearances in AAA this year, and he had a 7.23 ERA and a 4.27 FIP in the minor leagues. And the Twins saw it, and they're like, "Yeah, time to call this guy up to the big leagues." And he's pitched 8 innings at the major league level and has a 7.88 ERA. So it seems like Cole Sands is really bad. And then the Yankees offense, we know this is one of the best offenses in baseball. The Yankees might be the best team in baseball, and they're just not that popular today. It's hard for me to not have a significant amount of interest.
Yeah, I like the top of the order, but I think there's a lot of spots that aren't all that interesting, which is going to be a problem on days where they go homer happy because they've got an interesting balance of guys that are basically like all homer or not homer at all. It's either low ISO guys or the best ISO guys on the planet. So I could see the situation when it breaks, it's going to break the wrong way for you because there's too many guys that can just put a ball on the moon. They didn't grade out like all that spectacular for me. There's so many teams with comparable run totals today that I think that they're not all that owned, which is interesting. But I agree with you. I see a lot at the top of pitching, and I think that I'm more likely to pay down for hitting today. And that's sort of muting the amount of Yankees that I want to get because, 6,200, 5,100, 5,100, 5K, that is the heart of this Yankees order. You're not getting both good pitchers or like 2 good pitchers and the heart of this Yankees order. You're running out of salary. So I think that I can find a more efficient way to spend the money, but I do like the fact that they're not owned as much as I thought they'd be.
Yeah, and there is still some power upside at the bottom of the Yankees lineup that isn't really picking up ownership. The one that stands out to me the most is Joey Gallo, because Gallo's been one of the best power hitters in baseball for a number of years now. He has sucked this season. He has been miserable. And I don't really like to pie into recent results all that much, but he did homer yesterday. Maybe I could point to that and say it's a sign of things to come from Joey Gallo, but that aside, he's picking up very low ownership. He's only 3,600 on DraftKings. It's a positive matchup. He's going to be hitting towards the bottom of the order. But that doesn't even matter for Joey Gallo because he's so home run or bust that I think that he's somebody who makes sense as a salary-saving play that we could use to differentiate some Yankees lineups and save some money with. Another one, DJ LeMahieu's fairly cheap. He's going to be batting towards the top of the order. Not as much interest in somebody like Isaiah Kiner Falefa, but Aaron Hicks, another guy who in the past has been a good hitter. He's very cheap hitting towards the bottom of the order. So there are individual spots I could look at the Yankees lineup, and I could talk myself into these guys being cheap with upside.
I have nothing on the Twins that I really want to talk about other than I know why Byron Buxton's getting any ownership at all. But this is not a team that I'm trying to get to. And they are dead last in our stack score for today.
Yeah, no interest, especially because Tyone is solid. Even if he isn't the highest strikeout pitcher on this slate, he's very good. He's having a really good season. Much better pitchers to target today.
Bingo. Moving it on to White Sox and Dodgers. 4-run implied total for the Sox, 4-4 for the Dodgers. Michael Kopech and Mitch White on the hill here. No ownership coming to either pitcher. No one really popped for me. Are you seeing anything different? Do you see any starters in this game that you want to get to?
Not really. As a general rule, I kind of like Michael Kopech when he's low owned, and I kind of like the Dodgers offense when they're not super popular. But this is kind of an exception for me because if I'm going to roster an unowned offense that's going to be expensive, I just have options I prefer to the Dodgers. I'd rather go to the Yankees. I'd rather go to the Braves, we've already talked about, because Kopech is really solid. And then the other side, when it comes to Kopech, I don't really want to roster him against the Dodgers offense, even though I think Kopech individually is really good with a lot of talent. So I think, to me, also everything's expensive. The Kopech is expensive. The Dodgers offense is expensive. There's a lot of expensive pitchers that I think make sense today. There's expensive offense that make more sense than the Dodgers. So it's unfortunate because there's a lot of talent here, but it's kind of a write-off on both sides for me.
I agree. White Sox offense, 17th in top stack. Dodgers, 13th. Kopech, no ownership. White, no ownership. Clearly individual bats. If you want to try to pick them off, fine. Like if Freddie Freeman's your guy today, getting lefty righty in this spot is totally reasonable. It's certainly a great park for left-handed power. So any lefty bat that you want to take as a one-off in this spot, I'm totally okay with it. But it's not I don't expect to get a lot. I don't see the Dodgers and the Yankees being as different as our top stack tool is showing right now. I think it's probably a little bit closer. The matchup certainly making the difference here with Kopech on one side and Sands or whatever the hell his name is on the other. I've already forgotten. It was the last game. But I just feel like we're going to have better options across the board here. No, just nothing grades out well. They're not owned. The White Sox aren't owned. The Dodgers aren't owned. They don't grade out well. Kopech, no ownership. White, no ownership. They don't pop. I don't have anything else to add here, which is kind of crazy for the Dodgers.
Yeah, no, I don't. There's nothing I'm going to prioritize in this game from a pitching or hitting standpoint.
Well, then we should get away from this game. And then I think it's perfect for us to talk a little bit about our presenting sponsor, and that would be Prize Picks. I touched on a strikeout prop for Jamison Tyon a little bit earlier, but what you guys should do first and foremost is look at the banner at the top of the screen. Awesemo is the promo code, AWESEMO, $100 first match deposit bonus. You're not worried about like sharks or optimizers. This is a different method. You are basically making parlay cards. Up to 5 players can net you up to 10x your entry fee. And it doesn't just have to be baseball. You can do this across sports. And it's not just like main sports either. If you want to go baseball and highlight tonight, you can do that. If you are the type of person that knows baseball and highlight, good for you. We'll also probably hire you if you want to do some highlight content for us with the Prize Picks theme. Yeah, no promises. We're going to pay you precisely $0 because no one's going to read that. But just in case you like $0, let us know. Hey, if it's not highlight, maybe it's cricket. Maybe it's first half WNBA contest. Maybe it's PGA. Maybe it's Maybelline. I don't really know. But we can definitely talk a little bit more about Prize Picks. They have so many different stats just for baseball: strikeouts, first inning runs and hits, total outs for pitchers, fantasy scores, if that's a direction that you want to go, total home runs, if that's a direction you want to go. There are plenty of options. Greg, I know you look at Prize Picks pretty regularly. Have you looked at it yet today? And do you see anything that immediately stands out to you?
Yes. So Edward Cabrera has a strikeout prop of 4.5 over on Prize Picks. If you guys have watched Edward Cabrera pitch at all this year, not consistent, but crazy good stuff. Throws really hard. He is breaking stuff that moves a lot. But here's something else that really stands out to me. 4.5 strikeout prop on Prize Picks. Other sports books have him at 5.5. BetMGM 5.5, FanDuel 5.5, DraftKings 5.5. We have Edward Cabrera projected for 6.5 strikeouts. And given how good his stuff is, I am going to side with the over 4.5 for Edward Cabrera. It's a very low strikeout mark.
Yeah, that one's fantastic. And that's the type of thing you should be doing. Cross-reference some of this stuff at sports books with our projections. Use Odds Shopper if you need to. Because if there's a line out there that you can publicly bet on and you're getting a big gap, like in this case, a full strikeout in either direction, that's just generally speaking going to be a positive EV selection for you. And you should continue to build on those. Try to find as many of those as you can. Start mixing and matching. I think that's going to be a benefit for you long term. And you can use that extra $100 that you get if you deposit $100 and really start to build a bankroll. So thank you to Prize Picks. Game 7. Astros and Mariners, 4.7 run implied total for the Stros, 3.2 for the Mariners. It's Justin Verlander and Chris Flexen. For a second, when I started prepping today, I was like, I'm back to talking about KBO, but that's not what we're doing here. Shout out Chris Flexen in the KBO. 28% owned Verlander today on DK. In my opinion, completely warranted. He is the most expensive guy, and he should be. He's still really good. Chris Flexen, not owned whatsoever, and I don't believe that he should be. So where do you end up with Verlander?
Yeah, I mean, as we've been speculating over the course of the entire year, Kate Upton most likely the fountain of youth, because Justin Verlander at age 39 years old, coming off of Tommy John surgery, having not pitched basically since 2019. We saw him pitch 6 innings over the course of 2020 and 2021. He's come out this year with a 2.23 ERA, a 3.06 expected ERA, and throwing harder than the last time we saw him pitch, which makes zero sense at all. So I don't know what else to add about Justin Verlander. I know he's had a couple of starts recently that were not vintage Justin Verlander, but for the course of the year, he's been so good, and I see no problem getting to him at all today. The only issue potentially here is the opportunity cost associated with the price point, because he is 10-6 on DraftKings, the most expensive pitcher on the slate. Over on FanDuel, 10-9, the most expensive pitcher. If you have the salary to get up to him, go for it. But totally understandable if he's not going to be in like 30% of your lineups just because of salary restrictions. But he'll be in my player pool for sure.
Shouts to Kate Upton. I bet that's a real shot of life for him on a daily basis. I don't think that we need to talk about Chris Flexen. Let's talk a little bit about the Astros. Third most owned stack on the slate, seventh in our stack score. They popped aggressively for me. I have them as my number 3 stack. So I think that I'm more in line with the current ownership. How do you feel about Houston?
They're about appropriately owned. I think that they're a team that's worth rostering, but not that much different than the field we have them projected for. 7% ownership over on DraftKings. FanDuel projected for 8% ownership. That might be a little bit rich for me over on FanDuel. But in general, they're drawing a matchup here against Chris Flexen, who was a 4.55 ERA this year, a 5.5 expected ERA. And also his pitcher outlook, really favorable for opposing offenses. He's not getting ground balls this year, 35.6% ground ball rate. He's still allowing a decent amount of home runs per fly ball. So this is a really powerful offense going up against a pitcher who's certainly home run prone. It makes sense, but the ownership is kind of there, and I'm probably just going to be about in line with it.
I'm going to need you to keep talking while I continue to look at Kate Upton pictures. So just
No. I can do that for sure. So
give me 5 minutes. Jordan, I got to take me off of any sort of streaming. I don't need anybody seeing my face for the next couple of minutes.
Well, 5 minutes. You're a slow worker over there. But so also when it comes to, should we actually see how, if we weren't already 45 minutes into the show, I would keep the bit going and talk about the Houston Astros for the next 6 minutes?
Sure. We don't need to do that.
It would be funny though.
It would. I mean, look, it's true. She's gorgeous. I don't want to talk about the Mariners bats that much, I could tell you.
No, not against Verlander. I think that's a pretty easy team to write off on today's slate.
I completely agree. There are situations where I want to try to get on the opposite side of pitcher ownership. This isn't one of them. So I don't have an extra word to say about anything for Seattle. I just have some mild interest in the Astros.
Yeah. And your interest in Astros, same as me, where it's about even with the field.
Yeah. They are my number 3 stack, and they are third overall in ownership. As far as I'm concerned, that sort of lines up. Happy to get there. They're not so over-owned or under-owned that I need to make any sort of distinction. I'll take whatever I can get. Royals and Blue Jays, 3.5 run implied total for the Royals, 4.9 for the Jays. Brad Keller and Alek Manoah. Manoah, 7% owned on DK, 2% on FanDuel. Keller, basically unowned on both sides. I'm really curious to get your thoughts here. I expected Manoah to have a bit more ownership. Am I missing anything? Since, I am relatively new to getting back into baseball for this season, but he's grading out quite well for me.
I'd say the only thing that's a potential red flag with Manoah is his strikeouts are down fairly significantly this year. He had a 27.7% K rate last year. This year, it's down to 23%. But the results have still been really good. He has a 1.98 ERA, a 2.52 expected ERA. Zips and Steamer do project his strikeout rate to uptick going forward. They have him more in line with what he did last year, 27 and 26%. So I do think that should take off a little bit. I want to look at his swinging strike rate. So here's something else that's going to be a positive for Manoah. While the strikeouts are down, his swinging strike rate was 12.6% last year. It's 12.4% this year. That's not much of a difference to think that all of a sudden this is a guy who's going to see his strikeout rate totally plummet. And then looking at some of his other contact numbers, they're also fairly similar. He's actually generating more swings this year than he did last year. Let's see, his percentage of pitches swung outside of the zone was 31.2% last year. This year, it's 35.9%. The more I look at these numbers, the strikeout rate is really not concerning. That's the only thing I would point to and be like, oh, maybe this is a drawback for Alek Manoah. Everything to me indicates those strikeouts are going to be on the uptick. So as we're walking through this slate, and we're going to talk about Rodon in a little bit, if I have to pick one pitcher who's a pivot off of Rodon, Manoah is going to be number one for me.
I have Manoah 0.2 of a point behind Rodon, and he's less than 1/4 of the ownership. I think Manoah is the guy getting slept on the most here. The park is fantastic to pitch in there. You don't really have to worry about all that much power. There's not a ton of it in Kansas City's lineup to begin with. I don't think that they're a very strong offense in the aggregate anyway. The guy that I want to go to more than anything here is Manoah. I got him at 5.6 strikeouts. It's 5.5 on Prize Picks. So I don't think that I'm like wildly over projecting his current status. The runs and ERAs that you expect in a game like this are, you can break those down based on betting lines. So I think he looks fantastic. This is the type of guy that I want to pay up for at low ownership, because I think I can very easily find cheaper bats to offset the fact that I don't have to worry about this dude at all. I don't know why he's 7% owned, but I love it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think for single entry, if this ownership stays the same, I'll probably look to move Rodon to Manoah when most of the field is going to be on Rodon.
Bingo. I don't have anything to add for Brad Keller. I'm not trying to target the Blue Jays bats at all, and I'm certainly not trying to do it with Brad Keller. Not that I have a problem with Brad Keller. He's perfectly acceptable as a baseball player, but nobody exciting. Number 2 stack in stack score, number 2 in ownership. I can't really disagree with anything here. Toronto's just really good.
Yeah, 11.3% ownership share, 10.4% chance to be a top stack. If you're rostering them, fine, but I mean, it's hard to say that on a 12-game slate you should have, like 15 or 20% of any one individual team. So kind of similar to what we talked about the Astros before. Really good spot for the Blue Jays, and the ownership's there and in an appropriate way.
Yeah, certainly if you're picking out any cash bats, you're probably going to be able to get to a bat or two from Toronto. That shouldn't be all that difficult, and I would totally agree with it. So I think our top stack odds look correct. I think the current ownership looks correct. I don't have anything else to add. I agree. I like Toronto, even in a non-home run friendly park. And on the opposite side of this one, they are 23rd of 24th in terms of stacks. I don't get the sense that I'm going to be playing a ton of the Kansas City Royals.
No, I will be playing none of them.
Same. Nothing to add here. So we move it on. Brewers and Phillies. This is a coin flip game. Low to mid 4s in run total. George Costanza on the hill for Milwaukee here. Ranger Suarez going for the Phils. No real ownership from a pitching perspective in this one. Are you trying to get to any pitching in this game?
No, and I think the total is too low for this game because I don't have very much positive to say about either of the pitchers in this spot. Ranger Suarez was exceptionally good last year, and it was something by the end of the year I was like, I guess Ranger Suarez is just really good because I kept thinking he was going to regress, and then he kept pitching really well. He finished last year with a 1.36 ERA and a 2.6 expected ERA. And, those are outstanding numbers. Also, the strikeout stuff was solid from last year, 25.6%. That guy doesn't exist this year. He has a 4.69 ERA, a 4.41 expected ERA. The strikeout rate is sub 20%. So I just don't think Ranger Suarez is ever going to be that guy again. I don't really have any interest in him. And then, like you said, our friend Jason Alexander, a.k.a. George Costanza, his transition from acting to pitching, I don't think is one that's going particularly well because also, he's only made, I believe it's one big league start, but his minor league numbers weren't all that good. He's also toiled in the minor leagues for a long time. And this is something I bring up a lot when it comes to pitchers who we don't have much information on, unheralded prospects that spend a lot of their career in the minor leagues. There's a good reason that guys are in the minor leagues and bounce around from organization to organization, might take until they're 26, 27 years old to make the big leagues. And it's because they're not good. It's an easy conclusion to reach to. There's never a point in time where a team is like, oh, we need to get this guy experience at the big league level. So I don't think Jason Alexander is particularly good. I don't think Ranger Suarez is particularly good either. And I like siding with it from a betting perspective. For that reason, I think the over makes sense. Zips has Jason Alexander projected for a 5.25 ERA this year. Like I said, he's been in multiple minor league organizations. He's 29 years old. I think this is a good spot to look at these offenses being kind of contrarian ones to get behind. And I think I'm going to bet the over in this game as well.
I thought about not going with the George Costanza joke and going with Britney Spears' first husband, but I really assumed that no one would get that one. So I'm just going to move on.
I wouldn't have gotten that one either, by the way.
Yeah, he was like, that was the name of he was like a high school friend, and they got married some like random, like this is like pre-Federline. They got married, and they were married for like a day or 6 days or something stupid, and then they got it annulled. But yeah, name was Jason Alexander, which certainly made, if that happened now and Britney Spears was as popular, like the memes on something like that with her just standing with George and all the George jokes you could make would have been fantastic.
Yeah, I'm not even going to say before mine. I just wasn't aware of it at that point in time. Like pre-social media, you're just not hip to that kind of really, really important pop culture news.
I was deep in the Britney Spears game, as everyone should have been. As everyone should have been. I mean, just absolute aces. Better than Kate Upton.
Nah, I disagree.
We're clouding our judgment based on the things that we know now, and the shaved head and the smacking the car with the umbrella and stuff.
Maybe.
The slave video, toxic. I mean, we are talking tippy top here. Let's not forget.
I think age might have.
JT got there.
Yeah, age might be clouding my judgment at this point as well.
In what way?
She's past peak.
Oh, yeah. That long past. I'm not interested now.
So that's what I'm saying. That could be the judgment clouder as well. I'll do some research into the topic extensively after the show ends.
Kate Upton now certainly at a much higher level here, but Britney Spears was like Sandy Koufax. Peak was
Jordan.
Short,
by the way, Jordan, I think this warrants a poll in chat, but maybe the most important poll we've done in a while.
Peak Britney Spears, peak Kate Upton.
Yeah.
We got to evaluate peaks here because obviously old Brit's in a bit of a valley.
That's also just general. When you're evaluating which players are better from a historical sense, we're talking about athletes. Do you prefer looking at peaks or longevity?
It's so hard. It's so hard. Like, are we talking about Kate Upton again? Generally speaking, I'm trying to blend both. I mean, it's really interesting in like the Jordan versus LeBron debates because you can't look at longevity. Like there is no mechanism to think that Jordan will go down with like better career numbers than LeBron's just going to leave him in the dust. If you want to say that the 6 out of 8 is a better peak, like it's pretty hard to disagree with that statement too. Where you want to like, how much you want to weigh the fact that he's just out there over and over again. That's where it starts to get really blurry for me.
Yeah, well, Jordan has opted to not post the poll yet against my wishes, but it's all right. Chat's debating anyway.
Okay, chat will get there. Nate, Britney had a peak. Whew, that's harsh, man. Harsh. All right, bats. Number 9 stack here for Milwaukee, so nothing crazy, but not owned. 16th in the aggregate. Phillies are 7th in top stacks, 7th in ownership. I think that they are basically appropriately owned. Well, I mean, I personally think they're a little over-owned, but the Brewers, I guess, are probably the team that we need to look at given their current aggregate ownership.
Yeah, and I'm also still going to tend to want to get overweight to the field on the Phillies just because I think a pitcher like Jason Alexander making his major league debut at age 29 is kind of hard to project for. But like I said, I just tend to think he's bad. This is also a hitter-friendly ballpark in Milwaukee. But still, I think that from what we've seen out of Ranger Suarez this year, I think that whatever happened last year that's a fictional pitcher. That's somebody who's never going to exist. And I like stacking Milwaukee against the Milwaukee offense. A lot of upside, a lot of firepower, way different looking offense this year than they were last year. One of the highest ISOs in all of baseball. I think there's power upside here. I like them as a contrarian team.
All right. Anything else you want to touch on in this game? Any bats that you want to try to point out?
No, I think the key, avoid the pitchers. Offenses both make some sense. Preference towards the Brewers, though, just because they're so low owned.
Make sure that you guys do the following. If you've never signed up at Awesemo before, take advantage of this deal. MLB Strategy Show. One gigantic word. That is the promo code. You will get 50% off your first month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Either click the link that will eventually show up in chat or find the link in the description of this video. Projections, ownership, lineup builder, Discord, top stacks, top pitchers, top fighters, top golfers, top probably like a bunch of other top type tools that I haven't mentioned yet. You get access to everything across all of the sports for a month. It's a fantastic time to check it out. Give yourself something to dig into during this summer. Maybe you don't live in a place where it's nice during the summer. Use an Awesemo subscription. Make your online life a bit nicer. 50% off for everything. MLB Strategy Show. One gigantic word. Use that promo code and trust me, you should do it. And then hit that like button. Maybe we can get up to 178 right now. If you haven't hit it yet, please do so. I love chat sometimes. I really do.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Kate Upton in a landslide. Landslide. A lot of people are sleeping on Britney Spears. They're biased from what's happening lately in her life. Okay, Jordan. I don't disagree with you. I'm a huge fan. That should not be all that surprising.
By the way, also to my point though, we put up a poll with two names in it. We don't need every single lady you've ever touched yourself to now getting mentioned in the YouTube chat.
Well, I think Jordan's mention is like the new peak. I think she's the new Britney Spears. She's like Britney Spears evolved. Although, Sydney Sweeney should remake Crossroads. I'm here for it right now. Guess a lot of people skip that one.
64-30, I like in my favor as if I benefit from this in any way. But we do have the chat agreeing with me a little bit more than you right now.
That's fair. Look, I'm not going to kick either one of them out of bed. So
no. Either one of them, as we were talking about when it came to the Amber Heard trial, like either one of them could take a shit on my side of the bed.
What? You'd be okay with Johnny Depp doing it?
No. I mean, the Amber Heard. Actually, maybe. It would be cool for the story. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I would. If Johnny Depp was like, yo, man, this is how the rest of the night's going. It's just like, all right, I'm along for the ride.
I will say this. I would ask less questions if it was Amber Heard or Kate Upton. I'm going to ask Johnny what he had for lunch beforehand, though.
Oh, man. I don't know. I think I would rather have it be... I think I would rather Depp do it than Amber Heard do it.
No.
It's way funnier. It's a better story if Depp does it.
It's a good story either way. There's not a point it's like, oh, no, if only it was Johnny, I would have had a good story out of it.
I don't know. Yeah, no. I think I'd prefer it to be Johnny Depp, but only if he did it dressed like a pirate.
Well, I mean, the other thing, too, is I think there's an angle where if Amber Heard does it, you could become friends with Johnny Depp. It's like, oh, she got you also. And then you can bond with them. And then you get a bit role in Pirates of the Caribbean 9, assuming he's back to doing movies.
I don't think he's ever doing a Pirates movie again.
We'll see. He's going to need to make some money.
Money. Yeah, money's money. Anyway, let's close this out. 3 more games to go. Angels and Red Sox. 4.3 run implied total for the Angels. 4.7 for the Sox. Reed Detmers going for the Angels. Garrett Whitlock going for the Sox. Ownership coming into Whitlock, 10%. I think it's a value-ish play. I'm not all that enamored with him. I think there are plenty of other options that you can go to. I get why he's 10% owned. I just don't seem to care. It's a great strikeout matchup.
Yeah, and he's coming off one of the weirder starts we've seen of the entire season. So last time out against the Reds, Garrett Whitlock had a perfectly fine fantasy outing when the results were done. But the way he got there was so weird. He pitched 6 shutout innings with 0 strikeouts against the Reds. So ultimately, like, cool, you got the 6 innings, no runs, he got the win bonus. So you got, 15 fantasy points out of him. But it's a little concerning that he faced the Reds and was able to strike out 0 hitters in that spot. I tend to think it's more of a fluke than anything because overall for the year, we've seen decent strikeout stuff out of Garrett Whitlock. I think it was just one game where he didn't have his best stuff, but was also facing an awful offense. So it didn't matter. 24.3% K rate for Whitlock this year, 27.2% last year. So because there are such limited cheap pitching options today, I wouldn't consider him on FanDuel, but as an SP2 on DK, I'm totally fine with it. I think the strikeout should be better today against the Angels because, well, they can't be worse. He's not going to strike out -1 hitters.
I assume we're both not going to Detmers.
No, Reed Detmers. So he's a really, really highly regarded pitching prospect, but he really generates no strikeouts this year. His K rate has been really low. I think he struck out 4 more hitters, if I'm not mistaken, once the entire season. So there's a much strikeout upside there. He's also facing a Red Sox offense that is much better now than it was the first, few weeks of the season. The Red Sox offense is really struggling. Part of that was because Trevor Story, their big free agent acquisition in the offseason, he got off to a terrible start this year. I think some of that might have just been nerves. I think part of it was probably him trying to press a little bit, and especially after a slow start. What I really think turned around both his season and the Red Sox was there was a 3-homer game from Trevor Story, and I think after that he was like, all right, cool. I could just kind of be myself. I could go play baseball. I could go hit. But Reed Detmers individually as a pitcher, I don't really ever have interest in.
How are you feeling about the top stack in this game, which is very obviously the Angels? 4th in ownership, 4th in our top stack odds. I would have thought it was Boston before it was the Angels. It is not. So do you like the Angels? Are you cool with that ownership? How do you feel about the Boston side? Hitting is very interesting in this game.
Let me refresh the... here's the issue I have with the Angels. It's actually a few issues. Number one, they are going to be fairly popular, 7.1% ownership, 4.8% chance to be a top stack, but they're also expensive. In terms of the hitters I care about, if you want to roster some shitty guys at the end of the Angels lineup that probably aren't going to score fantasy points, all right, cool, but those are just guys I'm not interested in. So on the aggregate, you could say like there's some cheap hitters to look at from the Angels, but they're not guys I generally want to roster. The hitters I actually have interest in from the Angels, Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani, they're really expensive. The only guy I view as a one-off that I would like to get to for salary savings is Jared Walsh. Walsh to me is always a decent one-off with some power upside. I've given him out as a home run pick multiple times this year on my MLB betting VOD, but I don't think this is a team I really want to stack. It's more Trout and Ohtani as one-offs, and even that's going to be a little tricky with the pricing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a little surprised to see where they're at right now. I actually like the Red Sox side of this a little bit more. You're clearly paying up for like JD, who's 3.5% owned. That's a shot that I'm willing to take, particularly in a lefty righty matchup in a park that plays up lefty power, that plays up lefty power. So I like JD. I would happily get to lefty bats like Devers, who's already owned, but I'll take that lefty matchup in a spot where I don't know if Detmers is going to be there for the long haul in this one. I would have assumed Devers was going to be a little bit lighter in ownership, but he's not. But I have Boston, excuse me, I have Boston a little bit in higher regard than the current top stacks tool. So I'm a little bit more interested in Boston than what we're showing. I'm a little bit less interested in the Angels than what we're showing.
Yeah, I would say probably more aggressively for me, less interest in the Angels, just because I only really like 3 batters here. It's hard for me to reasonably make a 5-man stack, and they're popular.
All right. Anything else here?
No, I think I'm all set.
Bingo. Then we move it on to Padres and Mets. 3.9 run implied total for the Pods, 3.6 for the Mets. Time to talk a little pitching. Taijuan Walker for the Mets, Yu Darvish for the Padres. Don't know why I read those guys in opposite orders for the first time in all of this show. No ownership coming to Darvish. No ownership coming to Taijuan Walker. I need you to tell me if I'm missing something on Yu Darvish here, because I look at him in a similar manner that I looked at Alek Manoah. I'm a little surprised that he's not more owned.
I strongly prefer getting to Manoah compared to Yu Darvish, and a couple of reasons. Number one, I just think Manoah is better. That's first and foremost. It's also a much easier matchup for Manoah against the Royals. Darvish is going up against the Mets. The Mets have one of the best offenses in baseball this year. The only team that I think we could really say is clearly better than them from an offensive standpoint is the Dodgers. Then there's a tier 2 with like the Yankees, the Mets, the Blue Jays. I think there's a lot of teams grouped together that I would put the Mets in. But also, I do have some concerns with the dip in strikeout rate for Yu Darvish now, because he's 35 years old, and there just becomes a point in time where there's a skill decline. And Darvish has been a guy who's very regularly had around 30% carry. 2019, 31%, 2021, 31%, last year, 29%. This year's strikeout rate is down to 19.8%. And I really do think this is something we just could start to attribute it to age. So the other thing also, we were talking about swinging strike rate before. Darvish also was the lowest swing strike rate of his career. So when I was talking about Manoah before, his swing strike rate was more or less the same as last year. The strikeout should be fine. This is the lowest mark of Yu Darvish's career, which makes me think the decreased strikeout rate is probably accurate. So I think this is just a declining pitcher in Yu Darvish. I feel better about Manoah as a contrarian option than I do about you.
Okay. I just checked out my strikeout projection. So I have him at 5.1. Yu Darvish's strikeout prop on Prize Picks is 5 on the dot. So I don't feel like I'm dodging that one in any sort of weird way. He showed up in significantly more of my sims. Now, I am using Steamer as my baseline, but at 5%, this is the other spot that I would like to go to. This is another reason why I'm mildly paying up for pitching, but I think there are enough slivers where I can get in with more Manoah. I'm going to go to more Yu Darvish, although it does make me a little bit nervous, but I do like the game total on this one. Mets quite low. Not the best strikeout matchup in the world, but this is another spot where I think that I can get most different at pitching. Manoah ahead of him for me, pretty significantly too, in fact. But again, at 5%, it's not going to take a big stand for me on Darvish, and I can still get everything else that I'm trying to get to.
Yep. Yeah. I think based on the price point on Darvish, I think we could say that he warrants more ownership than what his current projected ownership is. I just don't view him quite the same as Manoah.
Any interest in Walker?
No, he's really sucked this year from a strikeout perspective. And another guy who's the underlying results have not been good. The actual ERA is solid at 2.88. So I don't have a ton of interest in the Padres offense either because they've been really underwhelming against right-handed pitching. Actually, one of the worst offense in baseball against righties this year. Machado's been really good individually, but they're really starting to miss the absence of Fernando Tatis. So I'm not dying to roster the Padres, but I don't want to be rostering Taijuan Walker on a big slate when he's a 12.5% K rate.
All righty, let's close this out. Well, let's not close it out yet. Do you like the Padres bats or the Mets bats? I was just moving us ahead because I think the answer is no, or at least for me, the answer is no.
Yeah, the answer is no for me as well.
All right, let's close this out then. Giants and Rockies, 4.6 run implied total for the Giants, 3.3 for the Rocks. Now we get to talk about Carlos Rodon and German Marquez, if you're interested. 40% ownership to Rodon, the highest owned pitcher on the slate. 35 on FanDuel, also a monster number. Deserved, by the way. Marquez, 12% owned on DK at just 5,300. I didn't really get to Marquez. I actually get to Marquez a lot when he's at home. I rarely get to him on the road.
Okay.
I agree that Rodon is really good. I don't necessarily find him to be the best option, but pitching in San Francisco, obviously great. Getting the Rockies outside of Coors, obviously great. I could probably pretty safely bump up Carlos Rodon. I don't have anything to say here. He's an exceptional option today. I just like some of the spots that you can get to where there isn't as much ownership coming in, but clearly fantastic pitcher today.
Yeah, if there was no ownership involved and you're just looking at the pitchers and saying you could roster any one pitcher on this slate, who is it going to be? The answer would be Rodon for me. Here's the issue is the ownership still plays a factor. He's 40% owned on DraftKings, 37% on FanDuel, and it's a 12-game slate. There's a lot of other options. Rodon is going to be in my player pool. I'm just not going to roster him quite as much as the field. So that's why I start to look at guys like Alek Manoah and try to find pivot plays. And it is a little concerning what we've seen from Rodon in his last few starts, because in his last 4 outings now, he has pitched a total of 19 innings and he's given up 15 earned runs. His strikeout rate is down. His walk rate is up. Is it maybe just 4 bad outings? Potentially. But it is a little concerning because he's a pitcher who has a really long injury history and has struggled to stay healthy for long periods of time. And you start to wonder, like, all right, the White Sox let him go for nothing in the offseason because they were so concerned about the health information they had on him. And there's also the velocity's down a little bit in the last few starts. So I do have some concerns there. But overall, he's a really good pitcher. Get exposure to him. I just don't want him to be in like more than half my lineups.
Okay. We are basically in agreement here. What are you doing with Marquez?
Yeah, so when it comes to German Marquez, just because the pitching options, well, SP2 options are so weak on DraftKings today, I think he warrants some consideration. This is obviously a tremendous park upgrade for Marquez, going from Coors Field to pitching in San Francisco. Although with that said, also really weird results for German Marquez this year, who in the past has found ways to have success at Coors Field anyway. he has just not been good anywhere this year. He has a 6.71 ERA, a 4.68 expected ERA. His strikeout rate is a career low 18.3%. So he individually hasn't pitched well, but the price point kind of offsets all this. You don't have to consider him on FanDuel at all, but on DraftKings, if you're paying up for offense, you need an SP2. I think you could do worse than considering Marquez when he's so incredibly cheap today. He is, was it 5,300? It doesn't take much to pay off a 5,300 price tag. That's really what makes him in the player pool for me.
Yeah, it certainly gets the benefit of a great park. I definitely don't have any interest in Rockies bats. They are dead last for me. They are close to dead last in our model, close to dead last in everything. I'm not even going to prompt you unless you want to be on the opposite side of the road on ownership. Is there any utility for the Rockies?
No. I mean, like you said, he's going to be the Rodon individually is going to be really popular. He has had some struggles lately. The Rockies are a much better offense against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching. Still a no for me though.
Okay. And then Giants bats, 15th in ownership, 15th in top stack. They're 14th for me. I think they are properly rated as a complete middle of the pack team that doesn't matter today.
Yeah, totally agree. Same page there. Pitcher friendly ballpark, better offenses to target. And there are still some really expensive bats in the Giants lineup, which it's not like they're that easy to stack up.
All right. Let's sum it all up. Favorite stacks for you as of 12:13 p.m.
All right. So if I'm paying up for an offense, I like getting to the Yankees or the Braves most. If I'm paying down for an offense, Brewers are one that stands out, and the Rays.
Okay. Top 5 offenses for me today: Cubs, Braves, Dodgers, Astros, Blue Jays. Obviously, a lot of that is going to be pretty costly. Top pitchers for you today.
Yeah. So in terms of pitchers, if you just want to play the chalk, there's no issue with Carlos Rodon. I am going to look to pivot off of him where I can. My favorite pivot option in the top end is going to be Alek Manoah. If we're going for cheap on DraftKings, I don't want to be married to anybody. Take some shots on Springs, take some shots on German Marquez. But I think it's a mistake to look at these cheap pitchers and be like, this is my guy today. I would kind of spread it around a little bit because it's hard to have a lot of confidence.
Certainly can't say anything negative about Rodon. I understand the ownership. I agree with the ownership on Verlander as well. Alek Manoah and Yu Darvish are the two pitchers that I'm looking at that aren't pulling all that much ownership. And I don't have a problem going all the way to the bottom for Kyle Bradish if guys like Jeffrey Springs or German Marquez are going to get any ownership. But I am not all that fond about the bottom. I have multiple pitchers at the top that I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Good show, guys. We took a look at Britney Spears, Kate Upton. Jordan dropped in a Sydney Sweeney reference, which is always great for me. We got to talk about 12 different MLB games. We have plenty of content coming up later today. Greg, I know you have, or I assume you have individual videos coming out for GPP plays today.
For the MLB betting video, I'll be dropping that later. The hottest dong pick of the day, if I find a home run bet I like. But yeah,
I can send everybody that one if you need it.
Oh yeah, that'll be Justin Verlander actually.
I've seen it.
You and me both.
There we go. Check out Greg's content. Check out The Process. We had our second video today, a little bit different than the NBA version that you're used to seeing. So go watch that. Thanks to Prize Picks once again for sponsoring. Good luck, everybody. We're back later. Deeper dive, live before lock. You got a ton of content for the rest of the day. Good luck.